What's up, everybody? It's Marcus D'Angelo, and we are back for another episode of the Hawk's Nest. And of course, I'm joined by the Murderhawk Monster himself, Lance Archer. Lance, last time I saw you, you did not have braided hair. What's going on?
Braids came back very quickly. I just decided it wasn't me, and I just wanted to go back to the braids. It was kind of the Murderhawk Monster is the braids, and I felt it was kind of what I should be doing.
I'm loving it. I'm loving that they're dark. Are you gonna go some color in there? Or are you gonna keep it dark?
No, right now it's staying dark.
Okay, it's
That's
a
that's kind
Lance
of the
Archer.
that's kind of the vibe of the Murder Machines.
Lance Archer's Undertaker phase right now. The the dark hair. Man, I'm so excited to talk about what's going on today. You know,
Yeah,
initially you and I had talked about it. We were going to talk about your the start of your run in TNA.
yeah.
Lo and behold, today's the 15th anniversary of your debut on ECW. You're an
Oh man.
ECW original, Lance.
The WWECW original anyway.
See, I knew, I was like, if he doesn't say it, somebody in the comments will.
Oh yeah.
Dude, what a cool topic, and it's like such a microcosm, like this tiny little part of your career, but during a
Yeah.
really interesting time, and you got to work with a lot of interesting people. I can't wait to get into the notes.
Let's do it, man.
Let's do it. So, first, I do want to kind of give a little bit of a setup for folks as to what was
Okay.
going on in the company at the time. In
Oh,
2009, WWE was right in the middle of their PG era. They've got John Cena, CM Punk, Undertaker, Triple H, Batista, on and on and on and on. Edge, some guys that you've had the opportunity to work with, in both places.
right.
At the time, WWE had three different brands: Raw, SmackDown, and its version of ECW. And
Yep.
after WrestleMania 25, you announced that you had joined the WWE, officially becoming a member of the roster on April 26, 2009, at the age of
Mhm.
33. So during this time, WWE developmental took place in Florida Championship Wrestling, and you and I are going to discuss that. But we've discussed it a little bit. We'll discuss it
Okay.
at length more. But what can you recall about who initially approached you about joining the company?
Well, so basically, we do have to go into a little TNA. So TNA was releasing me. I think I may have discussed this before, where I was in Japan and got a phone call. Well, I didn't get a phone call, it's because this was, mid 2000, before 2010, so 2009, and I had a discussion with Terry Taylor, and it was like, okay, the company was letting me go, but they wanted me to do one last moment with the company, and they were doing this off the wagon challenge. You come in and you challenge for a title. If you win, you're obviously champion. If you lose, you're out of the company. And so that was my role in my exit. And so I took it because it was a final payday. It was a chance to say bye to some friends and things like that. But on top of that, I had them agree to have me free and clear of my contract that day, which it wasn't done that day. Like, we filmed on a Monday, and on Wednesday it was completely null and void. They tried to play little shenanigans and tried to hold on to it. And I said, if you're not paying me, then I have to be done, or I'm not coming and doing this thing. So anyway, they agreed to it. Contract is null and void on that Wednesday. On Thursday, they had their FCW stuff that happened. They did their TV tapings and stuff like that. And like, normally you would have to be invited down and do a tryout and things like that. Well, I had a friend who, while my contract was still in effect, he reached out and said, hey, here's the situation. And on Wednesday, his contract is null and void. And I was already in Orlando. And they were like, well, can he just come to Tampa on Thursday? So I agreed to that. And I went down to Tampa, Florida, and basically did a private tryout. And I think I mentioned before that a few of the guys that were a part of that tryout were Trent Beretta, his tag partner at the time, Kalen Croft, Brian Cage, and I had a singles match. And I did three different matches, two different singles matches, one against Brian Cage, one against TJ Wilson or Tyson Kidd, and then a tag match teaming with TJ or Tyson against Kalen Croft and Trent Beretta. And then they had me cut promos and things like that. And ultimately, I think it was more of a test. It was kind of they'd had some bad taste in their mouth with some of the prior TNA guys that had come into the company and the way they'd acted. And, they were trying to test me to see how I was going to act. My work rate was fine. There was nothing amazing about it, I don't think, at the time, but there wasn't anything bad about it either. And they were just kind of putting me through the test. It was like they literally had me run a 5-minute match, gave me 2-minute break, had me run a 8-minute tag match, gave me another 2 or 3 minute break, and then had me run a third singles match. And then they were literally like, here, you got 5 minutes and you're going to cut a promo for us. And so it was just bam, bam, bam. And I think they were trying to see what kind of attitude I'd have by doing all this. And ultimately went through it. Dusty Rhodes was down there and he was a supporter of mine because he knew me from TNA and I'd worked with him a few times. And he was the booker down there. He's the one that changed my name to Lance Hoyt when I was at TNA, things like that. So I had friends down there. And ultimately, when I got the job, when I got the phone call, they basically said, you have a lot of good friends because I had a lot of good people that went to bat for me. From Kurt Angle sent a text or not a text message, an email. Like I said, Dusty was a supporter of mine. The late Andrew Artest, he had reached out to Johnny Ace at the time and said, "Hey, you should give this kid a chance." So I had several people, those people included, who reached out for me on my behalf, and I think that's ultimately what got me my job. And then, like I said, testing my attitude and the fact that I didn't come in there and whine or complain about what they were making me do. And I just went through the, I was like, all right, let's go. All right, let's go. So that's ultimately what got me the job. So it was not a sense of them reaching out to me. We let them know. They invited me down. They put me through the test. I had a lot of good people on my side, and lo and behold, I got a job.
That sounds overwhelming, all that stuff that they're throwing at you. Looking back on it now, Lance, from your perspective as, more of a seasoned vet in the business, did you
Mhm.
feel like you were ready for the spot at the time?
Yeah, I mean, I've been with TNA at that point for 5 years. I was still, even at 33 or whatever, I was still in the business. A lot of guys reach their pinnacles in their mid 30s. And so this was a prime time for me. Some people were like, "Oh, why do you even have to go down to FCW? You should be going right to TV." Because, like I said, some of the other guys that had come from TNA had went straight to TV. And for me, I felt like it was a good chance and opportunity to FCW because FCW kind of existed, outside the radar of WWE at the time. Like now, if you're on NXT TV, your visibility is just there. So, if those guys and girls going from one level to the next, they're already very visible. They're already very popular within their own niche, but it's all within that company. And FCW kind of existed outside that bubble. So we were at a time when you could be in FCW doing whatever you were doing, and they could call you up and completely change you. And unless you were just some random, very hardcore FCW fan from Tampa, Florida, you wouldn't know the difference because you wouldn't have ever seen us before. So I saw it as a great chance and opportunity for learning, making mistakes, learning WWE's style of wrestling at the time. Like you mentioned, it was a very PG era at the time. This was when like Linda McMahon was trying to get into the Senate and all this stuff. So like they were so PG, like they would stop matches cold if there was a drop of blood type stuff.
Wow.
It was so PG, it was crazy. I had a conversation with Batista, who, like you said, had mentioned one time, and this was after I got called up, and he said something to the effect of he's like he would have hated trying to be a heel now because they're so restricted on what they can and can't do. And a lot of that had to do with the extreme PG era that we were on because they were really watching their P's and Q's on everything, like I said. And a lot of that had to do with the fact that, like I said, Linda was trying to become a part of the Senate. So the company was trying to publicly be as PG as it possibly could be.
Boy, and, joining ECW under those circumstances, the
Hmm.
ECW brand, that's
Hmm.
rough. That's rough.
Yeah, I mean, once we get into that, one of my stories is around that, on an ECW no rules match that Shelton Benjamin and I did.
Oh, beautiful. Yeah, Shelton Benjamin is in the notes, so we are getting there. Now,
Okay,
and before we continue, I do wanna mention, Matthew Rodriguez does have a question here. Folks, if you wanna
what's up?
guarantee that we answer your question, make sure you hit that super chat. Any amount will do, and we'd be happy to answer your question. It gets pushed right to the top of the queue. All right, well, this is unrelated. I guess we'll answer it anyways. Matthew asks, Lance, would you
What's
love
up?
to fight Bobby Lashley in AEW?
Sure, why not? He's there now. Let's go.
I would love to see the Murderhawk Monster just take his head right off his shoulders. I think
If, if
it's
he gets in
inevitable.
the ring with me, then everybody dies.
Now, whenever you join FCW, and then of course you get the call, you're going up to
Hmm.
ECW brand. You don't have to get into any specifics. Whenever this call comes, though, are they
Hmm.
giving you specific numbers as far as the amount of money you're going to make, creative direction, anything like that?
No, not at all. I didn't even know I was going to be debuting the night I debuted. They brought guys and girls on the road all the time, and it was, you would work dark matches or you would work, live events or whatever the case was. And that was a lot of times so that, the main roster writers and people could get to see you. But while I was in FCW, we would have times when like Michael Hayes and Taker and guys like that would come down and they would have us run, matches in the FCW arena in front of them. It would just be cold matches in front of the FCW roster and Undertaker or Fit Finley or, like I said, Michael Hayes or Johnny Ace, who came down a lot, because FCW was kind of his thing at the time. So they would come down, watch you do these things, and then a lot of guys and girls would get called up, and it wasn't necessarily to be debuting or being on TV. That was just to be seen. It was to be, so that they could get a look at you, and they'd have you cut promos backstage, and they'd have you run matches, dark matches, like I said before. So like I want to say it was, ECW, SmackDown and ECW were taped on Tuesdays at the time. ECW was kind of a tape to live because they would tape it, but then it would air within like the hour that it was taped. Um, yeah, no, I got a text message or an email. I can't remember exactly what it was. It was like on a Saturday night, and they were like, "Yeah, we need you for TV on Tuesday." And I was like, "Oh, okay, cool." Thinking, like I said, that I'm just going to go up. And I'd gone a few times to different, like, where they'd bring a group of people when they were in Jacksonville, and they sent a group of us to Jacksonville, and we would work out in the ring before. So again, I just thought it was a moment of going up, and they were going to put me on the road and have me work dark matches and kind of get an idea and see if I was something they wanted to do. And I remember the morning of, I went to the little gym in the hotel, and Joey Styles was there, and Joey was kind of running the ECW.com stuff. He was putting all the information on there and stuff like that. And like I'm getting done working out, and he's coming in, and he kind of introduces himself, and we talk for a second. He goes, "Yeah, I'll get all your information for the website later." And that was the first time I got clued in on the fact that I was not just there to be looked at. I was going to be debuting that night and had no idea.
Wow.
So when you ask those questions of like, were all these things discussed and whatnot, I was like, no, not at all. I literally had no idea that I was debuting until Joey Styles was like, oh, yeah, we'll get your information for the website later. And that's when I got first clued into like, oh, this is not just a look at, this is a debut. And yeah, so nothing was discussed except for, that day of. I've told this story before on different platforms and whatnot. So like now I know I'm debuting. I've and I've joked now with what I've been doing in AEW for a long time. I've probably got the most squash matches, aka enhancement matches, aka enlancement matches, in the history of pro wrestling. I like to believe, because when I debuted on ECW, that's what they had me doing for like 3 or 4 weeks easily. But that first one, the story I always tell is basically like they changed the guy that I was working with like 2 or 3 times. So by the time I had the final dude that I was going to be working with that night, Fit Finley had worked with me, and he was the one that was kind of helping me put it together. And of course, it's not long; it's like 3 minutes long, something like that. So it's not a long situation. Um, I had, long hair down to my middle of my back, and I had a kind of a look. I had a full beard and long hair and things of that nature. And like literally, it's 5 minutes before doors are open. Like nobody else is in the arena. It's me and the kid that I'm working with in the ring. So whoever that kid is that I debuted with, um, Johnny Ace and Vince McMahon, they're standing outside the ring. Like the staff is coming into the building. They're literally about to open the doors and just let people start filing into their seats. And we're standing there. We don't know what to do. We don't know if we should leave the ring. We don't know anything. Because again, Vince McMahon and Johnny Ace are standing there. And then, they're talking to each other. And then Johnny Ace finally was like, "Kid, come here." It's like, "What's up?" "I'm cutting your hair." It's like, okay, cool. Am I still debuting tonight? He's like, "Yeah, all right, cool, let's go." So yeah, they took me. Johnny took me straight to the hair and makeup ladies. It was like, change his look, cut his hair, shave his beard, do all these things. And so she did. Janet, who ultimately ended up working for AEW for a while, she's the one that cut it. And then they sent me in events. And I think I don't know if I've told the story on here as
No,
well, but
let it rip.
It was just one of those, like, they took me into Vince, and Vince was like, he's like, yes, I love it. We're gonna break you down so we can build you up. So you like it? He's like, yes, now get out. So yeah, and also earlier in that day, because they were running through promos, I went up to him and I said, Mr. McMahon, I'm Vance Archer, because that was my name there, Vance Archer. I was like, I just want to say thank you for this opportunity. And he goes, not a lot of people get a second chance to make a first impression, so make it count. And I was like, yes, sir. And I walked off, and so my interactions with him at the time were very minimal. But yeah, that was my debut in the ECW experience. It went from not knowing that I was going to be doing anything to finding out that morning through Joey Styles that I was going to be debuting because of that, to chopping my hair and completely changing my look and what I debuted as, the super short hair and the no facial hair, no jacket, no nothing. Just, I always say they turned me into big guy number 3. Um, and that was Vance Archer, and the quick promo of Tiffany, I think that was her name, and
Yep.
um, uh, Abraham Washington, and they were like, "Who's that?" And she's like, "That's our newest guy, Vance Archer, and he's intense." And actually, Byron Saxton and I, who are still good friends, we're having conversations today, actually via text message, and like he would always just jokingly, like, he'd text message me, he goes, "Did you do anything intense today?" Stuff like that. He'd always give me grief, so it was fun.
Dude, like, what a weird turn for you this experience must have been, where it's like you have no idea you're
Yeah,
debuting, and then it's like, "Hey, you're debuting. Hey, you're having a
yeah,
match on TV. Hey, we're
yeah,
gonna cut your hair.
yeah.
Hey, here's your opponent." It's like all this stuff is just, like, overload, dude.
Oh yeah, and so as far as the hair got chopped, the beard got changed. I remember specifically I was walking because I didn't know where this gal came from. Because, like, literally it was just like, we need you for TV, you're debuting tonight. Like, nobody's told me anything as to why this came about. I just know I am. And I saw Michael Hayes walking down the hallway. And I remember this very specifically because, like, he looked up at me. He had papers in his hand, which were probably, scripts for the show or whatever. And he, like, looked at me and he went, ah, and he turned around and he walked off.
Had no
But
idea you were there.
huh?
He had no idea you were there.
No, no, he knew I was there. That's part of the story,
Oh,
is
go
that
on, go on.
I didn't know why he did that. I just saw him do that. And I remember very specifically because he looked at me, did it, and turned around and walked off. So I didn't know if I'd done something wrong. I didn't know anything. I come to find out because, like, the next week we're in England, which was another thing. I was like, they literally just put me on the road. I was like, there's no way they're sending me where did we
I've
go?
got it here. Hang on. It is
I start with an S,
Shreveport, England.
not Shreveport.
Is that it?
Sheffield,
No, it's
Sheffield,
Sheffield.
Sheffield, not Shreveport in Louisiana.
That's right.
There's probably a Shreveport in London as well, or in England as well. Um, but no, it was Sheffield, and I was like, yeah, there's no way I'm going. And they're like, oh, yep, here's your travel. You're headed off to London or Sheffield, England this week. And I was like, okay. And I think my beard had grown out, like I've just let the facial hair start growing, and it comes in pretty quick, and like I remember seeing Michael Hayes again, like in the lobby of the hotel in Sheffield, and he's like, okay, I can just keep it growing. I can work with this. So ultimately, what happened was, um, like I said, Michael Hayes and those guys would come down and see us do just tryout matches or work matches in front of them. Ultimately, he was the one that brought me up. He was the one that wanted me on ECW. He was the one that said, bring Vance Archer up. And I guess he'd made some cool comments, like to the point of to other people that he saw me being somebody that could ultimately possibly work with, like, Undertaker or whatnot.
Hell yeah.
So he's, in ECW, we're talking about ECW. ECW was a great starting point for a lot of guys. There was a lot of grief given about ECW. Everybody's like, oh, it's not the original ECW. It's WWE's ECW. It's PG ECW, blah, blah, blah. But, like, if you look back at it, like, that's where CM Punk got his start in the company on. Kofi Kingston, Sheamus, guys like this all started on that ECW product. So it was a great place. It's kind of like what NXT is now for the product. It was their version, but it was just under the ECW banner. So a lot of guys got their first opportunities within the company there. So it was a great starting point for guys and girls. Um, but Sorry. So yeah, so basically Michael Hayes was the one that ultimately was the reason I got brought up, but nobody had ever told me this ever, which I'm guessing now after being in the business, it's like they don't tell you these things because if they tell you them, then they change their mind, then they have to deal with disappointments and telling you and this and that. So if
Mhm.
nobody says anything, at any point they could have changed their mind and I would have never known. But so when I saw him in the hallway with my hair cut, my face shaved, and he threw his hands up and whatnot, the reason he did that was because what he liked and what he saw down in FCW with the long hair and this the vibe that I had there, they basically took it all away. But they never even talked to him about it. They never consulted him with it. Like, nobody ever went to him and going, "Hey, this is what we're thinking about doing. What do you think?" And him going, "No, I really like this look. This is why I wanted him here because I love this vibe and this look, so they could maybe go, okay, we'll keep it then." They literally was just like, all right. And my bet, though, is that the conversation between Johnny Ace and Vince when we were standing in the ring was, has he always looked this way? Has he always had this long hair? Where did he come from? And Johnny was probably giving him the bullet points, oh, he was in TNA. Yeah, he's had the long hair the whole time. Yeah, da 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 da. And like Vince was like, all right, let's change it up. Let's make him different than what he was. And that's where I'm guessing. Like, and I remember I debuted in I told my family and whatnot, obviously, to watch the show, and my stepmom had to tell my dad that that was me because like he didn't recognize me because again he hadn't seen me except for the long hair and the full beard and all that stuff. So that was kind of my whirlwind debut into the ECW product.
What can you tell us about, like, all this stuff, again, coming at you all at once? What can you tell us
Yeah,
about, like, and, obviously, you've been on TV, you've had plenty of wrestling experience, but now
right,
you're in the WWE, you're at the show, right?
right.
What can you tell us about the kinda nerves that you were experiencing on this day?
I don't remember being nervous. It was more just like, let's go, let's do this. This is why I came here. This is, while I understood the idea of going to FCW at the time, for me, it was an opportunity, like I said, to learn what they wanted, how they wanted guys and girls to be, to make the mistakes down there so that the chances of making the mistakes on the show, as you tried to say, were minimalized. So I don't remember being nervous. I was just like, let's go. And like I said, to go out there and do a 3 minute, it wasn't like they went, all right, cool, you're debuting on ECW tonight. You have a 3 segment, 20-minute title match, and you're winning tonight. They didn't do that to me. Like that might have made me nervous, but the fact that it was just like, all right, you've got this kid and slap the dog piss out of him and just toss him around from turnbuckle to turnbuckle and beat the living crap out of him. That was easy. That was fun. That was great. Just being able to walk out there and the crazy music that I had and all that stuff and whatnot. But the one thing I do remember is, like I was still going back to the question of money wise. I was still under the developmental contract, which was the better than normal developmental contract because of where I'd been with my time in the business and whatnot. But now I was getting that pay and I was getting road pay because you got paid, based on every show that you did. Now, if you were under a full salary, they basically just deducted that from whatever your ultimate salary was supposed to be. But because I was still developmental, um, I got my developmental pay, and then for every show that I was on, whether it was SmackDown or Raw, or if I went on the road for the live events, for every single event, there was X amount of dollars allocated towards that event to me. So I was kind of getting a double pay.
Alright.
Um, but I do remember because I still had to go, and I was living in Tampa at the time, so I still had to go down and do all the FCW stuff. I go down on Tuesday, do the taping, and then on Wednesday I fly back. And I remember I was like, I didn't know if I was supposed to go to class or what the case was. So I went in and I remember getting kind of cold shouldered from people because nobody knew it was happening. I think Dr. Tom may have known, like maybe Dusty probably knew, but again, they don't say anything because if plans change, they don't want you to, have to explain all that stuff to you and all that stuff. So I don't know who knew and who didn't know, but I know when I walked in that building, a lot of the guys that had been there for a longer amount of time, because it was less than 6 months from when I debuted at FCW to when I got on ECW,
Wow.
were pretty cold shouldered. People that I considered decent friends of mine at the time were not, I don't think, too thrilled that I was already gone up.
it's such a me business. Like, you have friends in wrestling, but I've also heard a lot of wrestlers say like you don't really have friends in wrestling. It's like you have people that you work with that you like, but none of them are your friend because they'll step on your neck on the way to the top. And it's like, man, I hope that's not the case as I'm getting into wrestling.
Yeah, yeah, it can be the case many times, and I think there, especially at that time, they wanted that kind of environment of kill or be killed type scenario. It's like they wanted people walking on eggshells. They wanted people worried about their jobs and their careers at every single moment, because they felt like if you did, then you would do anything to make sure that you and everything was successful around you. And if that meant cutting your own friend's throat, then you would do so. And so a lot of guys and girls acted and reacted that way. You made a lot of acquaintances, and there's still people that I'm friends with today that I made friends with there. And I think you do make friends with them, but it's just when you're in the environment there at that time, it can be very cutthroat. I think once you're kind of out of that environment, that's when you can just relax and be friends with those people again. Because there are people that I'll see that I haven't seen in forever, and it's very like jovial. It's very like, "What's up, man? Oh my God, I can't remember this, remember that, da da da." And we just go back into being friends because then there is no more competition in that moment. But yeah, in that time, especially in those mid 2000s, 2009, 2010, when I was there, like I said, because of the PG era, because Mr. McMahon was still very much in charge, and it was a very different time because my one WrestleMania that I got to do, that was when Shawn was retiring. Um, Taker was working still, but he wasn't working as much. So a lot of those top guys were on their outs as full-time guys. So it was a weird time of transitioning to the next generation. But again, those top guys weren't really wanting to give up their spots either. So yeah, so you ran into a lot of like crazy cutthroat moments.
You're also coming in a weird time in that so Jake's era, we'll call it 30 years ago,
Hmm.
that's an era where, see you in the ring is what you'd get most of the time when you'd say, "Hey, do you wanna go over the match?"
Hmm.
You are kind of in an in-between era. Nowadays, it's the accepted standard. You go over your match at length and really discuss everything. 2009, you're meeting Logan Jones for your first match there on TV with ECW. Are you guys going over the match a lot, or is it more like I mean, it's a short match, obviously,
Right.
so
Well,
maybe he's a bad example, but moving forward with people in WWE, are you going over the match a lot ahead of time, or is that not the accepted standard there at the time?
yeah, I mean, it was pretty modernized in 2009, 2010. Like, and yeah, Jake at a time, it was more of a live event time of the business. TV, uh, especially by the mid 2000s, was very established. So TV wrestling is very different than just like live event wrestling. And when you're talking about Jakes and the Hogans and those guys at that time in that era, like I think TV was more or less, even TV was more or less just they set up the cameras and they filmed whatever happened. And I don't think you were working for commercial breaks. I don't think you were working for sponsorships. I don't think you were working for specific moments and things like that. Whereas, like I said, by the mid 2000s, it was very much the case. Like I said, TV wrestling is extremely different than just live event wrestling.
Squashing somebody in your debut definitely feels like a positive sign. Coming out of that night, are you like, "Okay, I'm getting the shove." Like, how did you feel coming out of it?
No, I've been around the business even at that point long enough to know it's like, all right, this is a good starting point. But again, it wasn't anything specific. I knew that ECW was a good place to be for me, again, because it was a place to be, make my name within their audience product. I don't know how else to say that. To be visible on TV, because, like I said, even though ECW wasn't watched as much as Raw and SmackDown was at the time, it was still viewed by their audience. We're filming it in front of the same audience that's going to be watching or on SmackDown for that Friday. Um, so now we're getting known by the people, and it was a good starting point. As far as, do I think that the push is there? Don't know. I just know that I've now squashed somebody, and like I said, for the next 2 or 3 weeks, that's all I did was squashes, and that's fine. It's a great starting point, but it has to advance from there. So until things possibly start happening, you just don't know.
I'm going to hit another listener question from earlier. Again, for those of you who are just joining us, if you want to guarantee that I will answer your question or ask your question to Lance, you've got to hit us up in the super chat. So go ahead and do that. Any price will do. Anthony Manzano asked earlier, Lance, if you have to go back, do you think you would have went to the independent scene for 3 years or so before going to Florida Championship Wrestling? Do you wish you would have explored the indies a little?
What do you mean? I've been I've been wrestling indies and wrestling, at that point was 2010, so 10 years at that point.
So
Um,
even during your time with TNA, you were doing indie shots here and there?
yeah,
Oh,
yeah,
okay. So it was
yeah.
no new scene for you
I,
then.
I I started on the indies and then went to TNA, but TNA was a very open product for us. Like they allowed us to work third party bookings, to work indie bookings, and so I was. And I think I've stayed, my entire time with New Japan. When I was home, I would work indie shots and things of that nature. And now with AEW, we're allowed when those opportunities rise, and if they work into schedules and whatnot, that we can still work third party bookings. So I've never really, other than my short time in WWE, have never not worked on the independent circuit in some form or fashion.
There you go, Anthony. All right. So, week after again, and Andrew, our research guys in here, he helpfully pointed out it is Sheffield, England.
Yep.
So it is not Shreveport.
Yeah.
So you're part of this European tour, Lance. How would you compare? Like again, whirlwind. All of a sudden, okay, I guess I'm going to England.
Right.
How was it? Touring with WWE overseas as opposed to other companies you've been with?
I'd never really toured overseas other than some short shot independent stuff. Right before my release from TNA and joining WWE, that was when I did my short tour with All Japan. So this was, obviously a much bigger machine. The difference, with how WWE ran, and I think still does run to degrees and whatnot when they're on the road in the States, is, everybody's coming from different areas. You fly into the city, you just Uber everywhere, and some people still rent cars, and some people have buses and things like that. But when you're on an international tour, you travel as a group. So, you're flying in, they're taking care of the hotel, they've got a bus to the event. You're not renting a car and just getting yourself anywhere and everywhere. I don't know about now because, like I said, Uber is so easy to use even internationally. So that may be something that's more prevalent now when those guys and girls travel overseas. I don't know. But for the most part, like I said back then, and I still think today, if and when the company goes international, it's more of a group thing. It's more of like a team thing. You have a group bus or team bus, and everybody travels together, and you're taken to the events and you're taken out of the events at the same time, and things like that. So it's a different environment when you're traveling internationally. It's much more, like I said, group oriented in comparison to when you're home and you're just kind of flying in from anywhere and everywhere. And like I remember, in the U.S. I got on the road my first house show loop, and weather got crazy, and it was Oklahoma and Texas, and then I think Louisiana, where like there was 4 shots in 3 different states. And like I flew into Dallas and had to rent a car and drive 4.5 hours to get to the first show, and then you drive 4.5 hours or so to each show, and you end up in the last show, and then you go to TV and things like that. And it was all done by myself. Whereas, like I said, the international stuff is very much all together, and everything is pre-organized for you.
Once upon a time, there were, of course, a lot of European tours with WWE. One in particular happened around 95, 96, and apparently Man Mountain Rock, if you remember him by any chance, he was also Max Payne in WCW for a while. He was on these tours and
Mhm.
captured the boys on a handheld camera. A lot of hijinks,
Yeah.
on the bus. Did you witness or experience, I'm not asking you to snitch on anybody, any fun, any hijinks on these, tour buses?
No, and like I said, mine, I just went over for TV. I wasn't there for like a longer or extended tour. So I was just there literally like going to TV, but all the way over in Sheffield. So, flew in a day or so before uh to Sheffield, did the show in Sheffield, and then drove, because we had to go back. The only thing that I remember, because nothing specific, like nothing crazy happened, nobody did anything nuts because we were leaving the arena late at night. I think we had to like take the bus back to like London or somewhere like that. I'm pretty sure London. And then we were like, we were only at the hotel for, I want to say, like 5 hours, and then we all were getting on planes and flying back to the U.S. Um, our bus and it wasn't for any specific reason other than like there was some bad accident on the highway in the middle of England where the bus was at a complete dead stop, on their highway, and we were all just out of the bus kind of mingling in the middle of the night on this bus. And like I said, we only had a few hours to begin with, so by the time we actually got to the hotel, it was even less. So nothing crazy happened. That was just that.
Interesting lifestyle regardless, that you're
Yeah.
getting to experience this again, all of a sudden, just out of nowhere, bam, I'm on a bus with WWE superstars in London, and weird
No, I
situation.
was one of them. What are you talking
Yeah,
about?
well, that's right. I'm now a WWE
They're on
fan.
the bus with me. What are you talking about?
That's right. I was an TNA fellows, for God's sake. Following, we've got a month's worth of short squash matches, and you're gonna be paired with Ezekiel Jackson and
Mhm,
Zack Ryder during this time. The three
mhm,
of you are gonna wrestle Tommy Dreamer, the Hurricane, and Gold
mhm,
Dust. We are gonna
mhm.
talk about Tommy Dreamer here in a minute, but for right
Okay.
now, let's talk about the Hurricane and Gold Dust. What do you think of getting to work with these guys?
Great. Some of the first live events I worked on, I worked with Hurricane, and he was somebody that always he had a very good mind of the business. He knew, and I'm pretty sure that they said, "Hey, will you work with this guy? Help us bring him along," type thing. So he was very giving, in a lot that we did. Shane was very cool with me, like uh, I mean, everybody that I worked with at the time, whether it was Shane or whether it was Goldie or whether it was Tommy or whatnot, like I generally became pretty cool with them. Like Tommy and I are really cool still to this day. Obviously, Dustin and I are still very cool to this day. I don't talk to Shane anymore or anything like that, but like I said, he was at the time very cool. So getting to work with every one of those guys, knowing what they'd done in the business there at the throughout their time and whatnot, and kind of growing up watching them, whether it was Shane doing his stuff in WCW to when he went over and started doing Hurricane to Gold Dust and all the time he's been in the business. I wasn't a big ECW, the original ECW fan, but I did know who Tommy was, and I knew where he'd come from and what he'd been doing. So getting to work with each and every one of these guys who had extremely different styles between the three of them was big time learning experiences for me the entire time.
Earlier you had mentioned that, whoever it was, somebody had said that maybe they envisioned you working with Taker down the road.
Hmm.
It does make
Mike
me wonder.
Hines.
There you go. It does make me wonder. Taker, he's viewed as this kind of stoic, this locker room leader,
Hmm.
this great figure in wrestling. Did you
Right.
get to cross paths with him, and what was the experience like if you did?
Yeah, I mean, I'd crossed paths with Taker several times, and I thought maybe I told this story when we were talking about the early part of my career. Before I did anything, even with TNA. Like he was married to Sarah, and they were coming to a gym I don't know, excuse me, in Austin, Texas, and got a membership at the gym specifically because I knew that they were going to be there. First met her, and then she introduced me to him, and then we had one really strong interaction there at the gym. And then fast forward, like he was doing like a press tour in Dallas one time, and I knew somebody at the radio station where he was going to be, and they were like, "Yeah, just come on up," which I did. And I literally sat outside this radio station, like he was there doing it, and then he had to go somewhere, but then he was coming back, and he was like, "Oh, I'll be back in like an hour," and it was like 3 hours, but I stayed and waited. And I remember him seeing me still sitting there, and he was like, "Oh, you're still here?" And I was like, "Yeah, you told me to stay." We had a short conversation then, and like so, he remembered me because of those interactions. I think, like I said, being first introduced, by his wife at the time, Sarah, in Austin, and then me willing to sit, several hours waiting for him to come back to this radio station or whatever at the time. I think left a pretty decent impression of me onto him. So, like I said, oh, sorry,
Oh, that's all right.
I just killed my light. Can you still hear me?
I can still hear you.
Okay, I'll just keep talking until I plug this back in.
There we go.
Uh, yeah, so I had a pretty good relationship with the Undertaker as far as that was concerned at the time.
This is a
Um,
very Undertaker moment right now, the blackout.
yes,
I feel like
speaking
he's
of
gonna come back on, he's gonna be standing
ah,
behind you. Yeah.
if only, if only.
Well, let's move on to Tommy Dreamer. I had mentioned to you off air. I had the pleasure of being around Tommy last night. He was working
Yep.
at the same event as I was, IWC Winner Takes All, and
Right.
he's great. You can
Yeah.
still see the passion in Tommy Dreamer about wrestling today.
Oh yeah.
Man, and what a great source of knowledge he is for professional wrestling. What can you tell us about getting to run the house show loop a little bit with the hardcore legend Tommy Dreamer?
Well, he was kind of the first person that told them, because I remember I wasn't on a house show loop, and then all of a sudden they were like, "Oh, by the way, you're on this house show loop." Now, I'm pretty sure if I remember correctly, it was in Florida, and when you're on a house show loop at the time, you're doing 3 or 4 shows and none of them are close to each other. So you're doing a show and then you're driving 3 or 4 hours to wherever the next show is. And he was the one that specifically was like, "Hey, put him on the road with me and let me work with him. Let me teach him some stuff and whatnot." And so I'd known Tommy before that. Tommy actually tried to help me get into WWE at the time, like even before I joined. In like 2008. And it was a weird, time. And like, I guess he'd spoken to people and they were, because I was doing the rock and rave thing at the time. And, whoever it was that he was speaking to said something to the effect of like, "Oh, he's doing this weird rock and rave, rock and roll gimmick." And I don't know if we, like, it was a really weird BS excuse. Like, because if they like you and they see something in you, they can do whatever they want with you. But if they want to have an excuse, they'll make up something negative that they don't like about you that has no bearing on what they could do with you. And he was trying to get me in at the time, and they were just like, "Oh, he's just doing this weird comedy rock and roll gimmick. We don't like that, so we can't use him." And it's like, what? No, you wouldn't do that with him here. So why would that be the excuse not to hire him?
Right.
So he was somebody who I've had conversations with even prior to me joining WWE officially. So when I got called up, he was one of the first people that told them, "Hey, put him on the road with us. Let me work with him. I'll help bring him along. I'll help, get our audience used to the idea that he's supposed to be something special." So like he was putting me over every night and working with me every night and teaching me every night and learning new things every single time I got to step in the ring with him.
I know I'm asking you to reach back 15 years, but does anything specific stand out about what, like, he may have, taught you or smartened you up to or whatever when you would, step out of the ring with him and go to the back and ask how things went?
No, nothing specific. I mean, I just remember the interactions in the ring. Like it's, especially working there, like I said, working in front of their audience, especially at the time, was a very different animal than working anywhere else. The independent scene, especially because you're trying to work and learn how to work TV, even when you're working on house shows. But it was learning how to interact and react with their audience because they were very specific on things they wanted you to do and things they didn't want you to do. Like they were really big on the whole idea that even heels should smile. That was a real big thing back then. It was like, so you saw all these heels always having trying to have these creepy smiles on their faces because Vince was on this big kick of heels should smile too. And it's like, okay. So it was just learning to work in front of their audience, and Tommy was so good because he did have his legendary ECW legendary status, and it was an easy baby face to work against at the time. Even as a heel that's unknown, because it's always easier to come into the business as a heel because it's easier to get booed than it is to get cheered. Tommy was a very strong baby face, so it was very easy for me to go and be a heel, and he would teach me things when we were in the ring, and he'd teach me stuff when we were outside the ring, and he'd talk to me about, how to handle myself, the mannerisms I should have, how much interaction I should or shouldn't have with the audience, like I said. So he was teaching constantly, and and that was the good part about, especially my early days there, was everybody I think understood that they were trying to groom me to be something bigger. So everybody was willing to help me, whether it was, like I said, Hurricane Helms, or whether it was Tommy Dreamer, or whether it was Dustin, Gold Dust and whatnot. They had Kane working with me kind of behind the scenes a bunch, because like, obviously I'm a big guy. So it was a really cool time because there was a lot of people trying to help.
What can you tell us? We had touched on it a little bit earlier. What can you tell us about the kind of restrictive nature of the PG era, and how did
Mhm.
it impact you in a positive or negative way?
So the big thing was, like I said, obviously, as far as the language was concerned, you just couldn't do that. A lot of the very typical heel things that you would do as a bad guy in the business were just taken away. Like no low blows, and obviously no really negative interaction with the people, like flipping them off or cussing at them or anything like that. Very basic stuff. Some people would call that cheap heat, but it works. And a lot of that was just not something you could even do because, again, we were all working for a PG audience, even when you're working on live events. And like I said earlier, the blood thing, there was zero blood, zero. Um, I know we were going to possibly talk about it in a little while, but like I had a match with Shelton Benjamin. It was on like the second last ECW show that was ever airing under their banner, and we were having like a no rules or no holds bars match or whatever they call it, ECW rules match or whatever they called it. And like we were outside, and I gave him like a headshot off, like a headbanger off the announce table, and he must have just caught like the edge of the desk or something like that because I rolled him back in, and almost immediately, like again, we're doing tape to live, and the referee slides up to me and he goes, stay in the corner," and I'm like, okay. And then he's off, Shelton's over on the other side of the ring, and they have the doctor roll in, and the doctor rolls at my feet, and I go, "I'm not hurt. I'm not, nothing's wrong with me." And they send the doctor over to him. And like, I remember like it was such a small trickle of blood that like the doctor just kind of wiped his head and it stopped because it was a scratch. It wasn't like he wasn't profusely bleeding everywhere. It was a scratch, but they stopped everything, and it stopped for a good 2 or 3 minutes. And like just middle of the match, and it was just like, okay, I mean, what do you do here? And like I said, Shelton is so good, and I had enough seasoning at the time to understand. It's like, all right, as soon as they say go, we're going, and we just kind of worked back into it, and kind of just got, some stuff got cut, and we just kind of worked back to where we needed to be, and we just kept going. But literally, they stopped. Excuse me, they stopped everything for a scratch.
All of this is geared toward TV, so it doesn't really matter, if you've got to stop a match in the middle of it because, again, as you said, they're taping it and then they're gonna edit
No,
it in
no,
post.
they didn't. That's the
Oh,
thing.
oh, this was live.
Well, no, this was live tape. Again, it was like an hour before the show,
Yeah, yeah.
but they didn't. And I thought that too. I was like, okay, maybe this is because we'd had worked, as far as TV wrestling is concerned. We were wrestling to a certain point. We knew where it was going to go to commercial. We figured we'd be at commercial. So I figured, oh, they'll just cut this out because we've stopped. And if you watch that match back, that's on the show.
They just left it in.
Yeah, they just left it in. They just went to commercial when they were supposed to go to commercial and left what we were doing in. And like I said, I guess into a degree, it kind of added some realism to it. But like I said, it very much messed up the flow of things.
Um, as a performer, it's
Mhm.
like you're coming after a guy and you've just done the headbanger and it's like, you're getting heat on the guy and all of a sudden
Yeah,
it's like, okay, screeching halt,
yeah.
we're pumping the brakes. What do you do? Are you like interacting with the crowd?
But that's what I'm saying. Like, I didn't really know what to do. I just kind of stood there and waited. And I mean, there was a little interaction, and maybe I could have and should have been more interactive with the fans while I was waiting for the moment. But it was just such a just like, okay, stop. And so you're just kind of waiting for them to say, all right, go. It's kind of like in boxing when the referee tells them, or MMA when they tell them go to their corner. They go to the corner and they don't do anything crazy. They're not yelling and screaming at the crowd. They're just waiting. And then when the referee goes, all right, fight, go, you just go. So that's literally what the moment felt like. It was just, I was in the corner. I could hear people yelling certain things. I could have probably been more interactive with them at the time, but I wasn't. And it was just kind of like, I don't know what's going on here. I don't know if they're just going to end this whole thing. I don't know what's happening. Like I said, because the doctor just checked him, he was fine, and the referee was like, all right, let's go.
That's an uncomfortable moment for a performer to be put into, just out of nowhere. It's like getting heat, stop, and
Yeah.
everything is screeching awful.
And I don't remember it being like, I just remember going, are you kidding me? You're stopping? I mean, like I said, we're in the middle of a no rules, hardcore ECW rules match or whatever it is. And, because we're in this PG era, even on the ECW product, they were stopping it for a trickle of blood.
Well, on the plus side, you are working with Shelton Benjamin. You mentioned it, great
Yep.
athlete, and now he's part of AEW, which is
Yep.
fantastic. And he looks and performs as well as ever. What can you
Yep.
tell us about the type of athlete that Shelton Benjamin was and is?
I mean, always just an amazing athlete. I mean, obviously, you've seen the matches he's had over his entire career. There's stories of him being able to walk the ropes like unhelped. Like I do the rope walk, the Taker style rope walk, but it's always with somebody. And I know stories of him down in his old deep south or wherever he was at, and like he would walk the ropes from corner to corner without help.
That's insane.
Like I've heard a story where he just for fun, and I don't think this was during a match. I think it was like training, but like he just walked all four corners, stuff like that. Like that's the athleticism that he, had as the amazing athlete, the top tier national championship wrestler that he always has been and was. And, like you said, he's still in phenomenal shape. He's still an amazing athlete. He and I actually really became friends in Japan. I mean, we were cool at ECW, but it was at a moment when he was kind of on his way out, like from the ECW to the last year that I was there, and because he got released while I was still there on the SmackDown product and whatnot. So he wasn't very happy at the time, which that happens to a lot of us at different times in the business. So him and I were cool, but we weren't friends. And then it was Japan when he started working with Suzuki Goon that and it was me, him, and Harry, and we were in Pro Wrestling Noah's. It was just the three of us, and that's when him and I really started like hanging out, and we actually became friends.
Now, your pairing with him is going to continue into early 2030, but not long after, WWE is going to announce that NXT is now replacing the
Mhm.
ECW brand. How did you feel about the news? Is anybody like coming to you, like reassuring everybody, like, "Hey, everything's fine," or like, how does that go?
Yeah, they literally grabbed us all like I think on the last week of the ECW product. So like the week after I had that match with Shelton, and they had all the ECW talent come and we had a meeting because again we were all taping this at SmackDown. And they were like, listen, here's what's happening. ECW's, this is the last week ECW, which we'd all heard rumors of. And then, coming next week or whenever it was, they're going to do this NXT show. And, at that time, the original NXT was more of like a reality type game show. And they were telling us about it, and they were putting over how great NXT was going to be at the time, which didn't involve any of us. So we were just like, yeah, okay, that's great, but we're all kind of like, what about us? And they kind of allocated most of us to different shows. Like I literally got a call and was like, hey, congratulations, you're going to be a part of the SmackDown crew. And I just remember like getting the phone call and being like, okay, yeah, cool. Like I expected it, but didn't realize that there was actual like whether they were going to put people on or not. Like I just thought, okay, we're just going to be on the road and they'll just kind of spread us out to wherever, whenever. And I guess they really were making decisions on what to do with people. And so I actually was actually like told, okay, you're going to be a part of the SmackDown crew.
So hearing congratulations, you're part of SmackDown, it's like, oh, that was never not a thing, like.
Exactly. That my mind was just like I was just like, oh, I've got travel for next week, so I guess I'm just doing this, and didn't know that, like I said, that they were actually having conversations what to do with people and going, all right, we're gonna put Vance on SmackDown and this guy on the Raw and blah blah blah. I didn't know that conversation was actually happening. So yeah, when I got the phone call, it was like cool, but in my mind, I was like, oh, okay, wasn't this always the plan? But not, now looking back, I was like, oh, maybe there was a chance that they either released me or just sent me back down to FCW. I don't know, but yeah, I got a phone call. It was like, hey, yeah, you're going to be on SmackDown.
Well, you've got a big moment coming up next. It's WrestleMania 26, as we talked about before, and you're part of a 26-man battle royal. Man, your WrestleMania experience here. What can you tell our audience about it?
About my Mania moment.
Yeah, your
Yeah,
Mania moment, 26-man battle royal.
yeah. And this was before they were doing the crazy long shows on TV. Now they split it up into 2 days and whatnot. And this was like the pre-show battle royal or anything pre-show was never seen except for like on the DVD collections. You if you weren't there live, you didn't see it on TV because like then even after we were there, like there would be like what 3, 4, 5 matches, 2 or 3 hours of pre-show stuff, and then they would do all of Mania, and so it became a different thing. So yeah, at that time, the pre-show battle royal was kind of a it was a reward to a degree to all the guys that were not going to be on the show, and they didn't always do it. And I remember they were discussing whether they were going to do it that time, and they did decide to go ahead and do it. Um, and it was cool being able to lace up the boots and walk down the ramp. I remember, who's now Gabby Tuft, was Tyler Rex at the time, and Tyler Rex and I were best buds, and we used to hang out. And um, Tyler was right behind me. I just remember Tyler being right behind me, and we're walking on this amazingly long, big ass ramp down to the ring at WrestleMania in Arizona. And there's probably about, I don't know, 50,000 of the 70 plus thousand that were going to be in the arena for that night. And I just remember kind of looking back at him and go, "Isn't this freaking cool, man?" And he goes, "Oh man, this is so cool." And then we get in the ring, and I remember I was like, "I'm gonna take my moment," and got up on the corner and posed and whatnot. And because a lot of the guys didn't, because it was just the pre-show battle royal. And I also remember I'm one of the very few people that the Cobra, Santino Morella's Cobra, has actually caused drawn blood on. Um,
Whoa.
because there was a moment where I was coming with a clothesline, he was going to duck through it, and then he was going to catch me with a Cobra, and I think he just forgot and just popped me right in the face and bloodied my lip in the middle of the pre-show battle royal. And uh, my friend like I said, the then Tyler Rex, not on purpose, but kicked me in the balls, stomping me in the corner, one time. And
Not a mania.
no, not maybe. So I have it was a pretty interesting time getting to go down, but it was cool, man. Because like I said, there's not a lot of people. I mean, there are a lot of people, but there's a lot of people that will never get any kind of mania moment. And I got to be in the pre-show battle royal. It was fun. It was cool.
I mean, in the grand scheme of things, you're part of a very small fraternity of humans that got to walk down the ramp at WrestleMania. Like, it's incredible, man.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. And no pressure. There's you asked me, what was the pressure like when I was debuting and things of that nature. Like none of these moments for me, like I said, were big moments, but they were big moments because they were fun moments. So there was just no pressure on them. Like I said, I just remember the battle royal just being fun. Like they actually featured me decently. I got to eliminate two or three people, and I think Yoshitatsu, who ultimately won the thing, is the person that eliminated me. And it was fun. There was no pressure to it whatsoever. It was cool to get, like I said, to experience that moment, to be a part of the week and do the access stuff and go to the Hall of Fame and get to walk down at WrestleMania. Like I said, I would obviously not knowing that would be my only one, but at the same time, it was still cool.
Well, following Mania, you're going to be paired up with Kurt Hawkins,
Mhm,
and yourself and Kurt attacked both MVP and Christian in multiple incidents during the summer. The
mhm,
program is going to last several months. I personally, I'm a big fan of Brian Myers. I like him. He seems like a
mhm,
great dude. I love
mhm.
his work.
Yep.
Uh, Lance, what can you tell us about having the opportunity to work with him?
Well, backstory to that was when I first showed up at FCW. He was at a time when they weren't really doing anything with him, and if you sat on the sidelines too long, a lot of times those were the people that got released. And so he took it upon himself to come down to Florida, to Tampa, and kind of interject himself into FCW. Like I said, he's always been very well respected, had great relationships with like Dr. Tom and those guys. So they welcomed him because he's an amazing wrestler and a wealth of knowledge and things like that. So he brought himself down there, and he pitched us being a team together. To which at the time they just were like, "No, we don't know yet," blah blah blah, and they kind of blew it off. Fast forward past ECW, and you're talking about going from ECW to SmackDown. It was like 3.5 months of literally there every week, doing absolutely nothing every week, and not an inclination that I was going to do anything. And then randomly, I don't remember where we were, but he messaged me at the hotel. He was like, "Oh, hey, man." He goes, "I'm at the hotel." And I was like, "Awesome, man. You're on the road this week." And he goes, "Yeah." He goes, "Remember that angle I pitched a long time ago for you and I?" And I go, "Yeah." And he goes, "They're doing it now." And I go, "Oh, that's awesome. Let's go." And then initially we were supposed to film like a bunch of vignettes. The whole idea was that we were kind of invading things. We were going to film vignettes outside the arena in front of the semis with everybody's pictures on it. Because again, I hadn't been on TV in 3 or 4 months. He hadn't been on TV since the Edgehead stuff or whatever it was. And so the whole idea was that we were both returning to action, but we were going to do it in more kind of an invading style action. And that night that we were supposed to film everything, because again, TV was always written and rewritten. And, for the last, for an hour before the show, we didn't know what anybody was doing. That's what we were supposed to do. And then it ultimately did not happen. So we got thrown into just a dark match together. And one of my more fun stories or funny stories was, we have this dark match and it's just us against a couple of locals, another enhancement match that I had. Um, and I get done with the match and I'm walking back through the curtain, and Billy Kidman, who's always at Gorilla at the time, was like, "Hey, Vance." He was like, "Hey, Vince likes your beard." And I went, "What?" And he goes, "Vince likes your beard." And I was just like, "Okay, great.
Sweet.
I I don't know what to say to this other than thank you. I don't know." And ultimately, like, we go and have this match, and we're kicking the crap out of these kids, and we're doing our thing, and the whole point was, for us to get some continuity together. And I'm sure Vince, because everything is broadcast into his office, they probably did a close up of my face because we had to put holds on people during matches so they could get good facial close ups and whatnot. So I'm guessing that's what happened. Is I had one of the guys and I had him in a hold, and they probably did a good facial close up, and I had a real nice beard at the time. And Vince pipes into Billy and he's like, "His Vance always had that beard." And Billy was like, "Yes, yes, sir." And mind you, I've shaken Vince's hand every week for the last 3 months, but he had no reason to give a shit about me, so he didn't.
Hmm.
Uh, and it was just at that moment that they had me on camera and in his office, and he looked up, probably saw it, and he liked it, and like I said, buzzed into Billy and was like, "Vance always had that beard." And Billy was like, "Yes, sir. He's been growing it, but he's had it for a while." He said, "I really like the P-shirt time. I like his beard." Okay. And like the next week, we were on TV. I think all because he liked my beard.
I just picture him standing up in his office, like, look at that beard. Great shit,
Ah,
pal.
that's a hell of a beard. Look at that beard.
So that's what it
That's
took to you're
that's
how tall
that's
are you?
TV.
You're like 6'7"?
Yeah, 6'6", 6'7".
You're this massive guy, and that's what gets his attention. He's like,
Yeah. Well,
beard.
but I think it's the land of the giants, bro. 6'7's almost average at the time, So yeah,
Insane.
the beard stood out.
Well, your run, of course, will come to an end in November. You're gonna get released along with 5 other wrestlers. What are your recollections of your final days with the company?
Just a lot of uncertainty. So talking about the last days, this was going back to my friend Tyler Max. I remember like the week before or the week of when I got released, they grabbed like Tyler Rex and a few of those guys. And again, we were talking about contracts. So everybody that I was friends with who had been in FCW had been on the road, but all of us had been under like not the dual contracts, but we were under our developmental contracts, and we just got paid every time we went on a show. Um, he and some of the other people were getting put on full salary contracts, like main roster contracts. I wasn't one of them that was having that done. I remember my last match there was against Luke Gallows. And the match we were having, I remember after the fact, Gallows told me that basically, like, we had this match plan, we were about to go out. Um, there was some weird moment where they were like, "Oh, we need to hurry up" or something like that, and they were about to cut the match, and it was like Arn Anderson or somebody who was like, "No, it's only like a 6 minute match. Let these guys go out there and do their thing." So they let us go wrestle, but I didn't know they were about to cut the match and not even let us go out there. And Gallows and I were both guys that got released in that group of people that got released. Um, um, yeah, so that was kind of a weird moment, like I said. And also, like the next week, because we did that match, and then like the next week was going into like Thanksgiving, and whoever the developmental guy that was on the road, like they would give us a car. And I guess some of the other guys had gotten released before I did, so they kept like sending us emails going, "Well, now the car's in so and so's name." Whoop. And it finally ended up in my name while I was training at Rob's gym, which is John Cena's gym, where they were sending a lot of the guys to do training at, weight training at. And I'd gone and done my morning session. I got the email that the car was now in my name. And now I'm trying to figure out how I'm going to get the car back, because I wasn't thinking, "Oh, I'll just leave it in Jacksonville," because we were in Tampa, because I was supposed to be flying home for Thanksgiving. And so, like, my mind's thinking about Thanksgiving and what am I going to do with this car now that it's in my name? And like, I'm driving back home from this training session, and then I get the random phone call of, like, it was the block number or whatever. And a lot of times, especially back then, this because this is before you get like tons of scam calls. And so I was like, "Uh-oh," and then it hung up on me. So I was like, "Okay, maybe it wasn't." And then again, it calls, and the person was like, "Oh, can you wait on hold for Johnny?" And when you get that call, you just know what it means. And sure enough, Johnny gets on the phone. He's like, "Hey, Vince, so unfortunately, we're going to be releasing you. I'm sorry this has come to this, blah, blah, blah." He's like, I think you should really work, you should go to Japan and find this killer. And then once you do, we'll bring you back. And I was like, okay. And now went from, trying to plan my driving to Jacksonville and getting the car and flying home and all this stuff to, now I don't have a job and now I have to figure out, how do I get home, and luckily I'd lived with Gail Kim for a long time in her apartment. She rented a room to me. And then I was living with Santino in a room that he had rented to me. So I didn't have like a lease or anything that I had to worry about breaking. I just like let them know. I was like, "Hey, I got released, so I'm going to be trying to head home as quick as I can." And that's what I did. I went and got like a trailer hitch put on my truck and rented a U-Haul and got my ass home just in time for Thanksgiving.
So you're getting brought in kind of on a dime out of nowhere and leaving out of nowhere.
Yep.
Man, insane. And
Yep.
it's every year there seem to be mass cuts by WWE. They just recently did one. Unfortunately, Baron Corbin's time with the
Yep.
company came to an end. This will be our final question for this week. What
Cool.
advice would you give to wrestlers about how to handle a release in the end of a run?
Um, I, it's such a different era. I remember because like I started my Twitter account back in those days. But social media was still, even, Facebook, and, I don't even remember if Instagram was a thing or not, or, it was just beginning, and Twitter had just kind of really started going and things like that. Um, Now it's such an ingrained part of all of society. And it's, most people are very quick and easy to get on there and air their emotional reactions. Um, my biggest advice, especially if you feel like you're going to stay in this business, is to keep your emotions in check. I think a lot of society, and I'm not just talking about wrestling, is very quick to emotionally react to everything, and they do it very publicly. And if you do that, then you're going to, kind of burn those bridges with people in ways that, you may regret doing at the moment because you'll want those relationships to continue. And the one thing that I've learned in the business of professional wrestling is that a lot of times you get jobs, you keep jobs, or you can get jobs in the future based on the relationships you have with certain people, because powers of, who's in charge is always changing, and there's always people that have different strong influences. And like I said, the reason I even got my job at WWE at the time was more about the relationships that I made and the people that went to bat for me, more so than, my ability or what I was doing in the ring. So for those guys and girls, and I think that's why you do see a lot of them being thankful and grateful for their opportunities when they're going out, because they understand that, the business cycles. As you've seen, there's been a lot of guys and girls that were released and then brought back. Gallows is a great example. He was released at the same time I was, ended up in Japan with me, and then he's been back with the company, ever since. Well, he was there, and then he got released again, and now he's back with the company again. So it's one of those things that the business cycles. There's going to be opportunities moving forward, and unless you're just ready to be completely done with the business, is my biggest advice is keep your emotions in check. Understand, have those discussions with your friends that are, you're close with, and you can have that confident conversation with, that they're not going to go out there and put it out there publicly on you. And then just keep pushing forward, because you never know where the next opportunity is. Like I said, mine have come at the end of each one, whether it was going from I had the door shut to TNA, and then I had it reopened by somebody else. I had the door shut to WWE, and then was reopened at a later time, not that much further past it. When I left WWE, I had a door open in Japan and had, 9+ years there. And then the door opened for me at AEW, and it was a lot of because of the friends I'd made. Obviously it was a new company, and I had the best year of my professional career in 2019, and that helped me out tremendously as well. But I think if I was an asshole, if I was somebody that nobody liked, even with what I was doing at the time, then I probably wouldn't have had the opportunity to join AEW when I did.
Excellent advice, and yeah, the door is never fully closed in wrestling, I don't think.
Right.
So it's and to your point, it's man, relationships in this business, holy shit, are they important?
Oh, big time.
Getting to know people, networking, stuff like
Yeah.
that. So yeah, keep your mouth shut unless you have something positive to say out there, gang.
Yeah.
And we're spreading a lot of positivity here, man. Another
Yep.
really fun episode with you. This was episode 5 of the Hawk's Nest. I'm gonna do a
Fine.
sample.
Fine time. Fine.
I'm gonna do a sample of Zane's clip where he's going "Caw!" and put that at the end of it for our Hawks Nest noise. But we'll be back in 2 weeks talking about something. I don't know. We might do another Murderhawk mailbag.
we'll
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 reach in the
figure out
bag.
something. Maybe
Yeah.
we'll find somebody to join us.
Hey, in the meantime, Lance, are you going back to TV sometime soon? Can we tune in and see you there?
Yeah, man, I'm there every week now. And then I'm part of the Don Callis family, kicking ass with Brian Cage and Murder Machines.
Dude, what a tandem the 2 of you make. You've been on a dominant run there so
Hell yeah.
far, and, I think the domination is gonna continue, whether it's
Yep.
on Dynamite or Rampage, Collision. You
All
never
of them.
know where they're gonna spring up, gang. So,
Everybody dies.
everybody dies.
Everybody
Stay
dies.
tuned, and, stay tuned here. We'll see you guys in about 2 weeks.
Later, guys.